I think if we were to actually get back to the heart of prayer, it is about, I want to use this word, it's a churchy word, the communion with God.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're here.
Yeah.
Pulpit to podcast.
Yeah, man,
Sweet.
we're excited.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, I don't know what we're doing, but we're just here.
I mean, I was literally just walking in the hallway. You were like, "Hey, Bo, get in here." No. So tell us a little bit. Like, what are we doing here? What's the goal here?
Yeah. So I'm Jeff Turner, by the way, if you have no idea who these two dudes are in front of you.
And I'm Bo Steele. I forgot to, bad host here. I forgot to introduce the people in the podcast. But.
Yeah. So I'm pastor at Camano Chapel, and Bo and I, a couple weeks ago, we just said, hey, not even a couple weeks ago, this has been like almost like when I got here, we started talking about wanting to have something offered out online that's part of our church to reach people, whether they're in our community, they're in our church. You think about the guy or girl that's down the road going to work at Boeing and they've got nothing to listen to at 4 a.m. Man, they could like midweek get on, whether it's going to be on Spotify, YouTube, all the things. And it's like, hey, I want to listen for 20, 30 minutes to the ramblings of two dudes talk about the Bible, talk about cultural things, talk about fun things. So, I just hope that like everything we're doing is going to do something to fill you up, make you think, make you laugh, and walk away going, this is something I want to listen to. And also part of just inviting you into the life of who we are at the chapel. Because, you may just come on a Sunday and listen to me ramble or whatever. And, then it's like, hey, how can we also maybe tease out what we talked about on Sunday and maybe sometimes dig into the topic a little more than we did. Yeah. We could have done on Sunday. So really, we're just kind of like throwing the dart and seeing like where it lands, you know. This is us. So Pulpit to podcast, man.
So sometimes we might be talking about the sermon. Sometimes we might be talking about just a hot topic or something that's really on our hearts. Yeah. If you know me at all, I like to talk about aliens, but
So, we're talking.
But that's probably not going to happen.
Yeah. Oh, it is going to happen. We are definitely going to talk about aliens, and we're going to talk about all kinds of things. But anyways, we just said there's sometimes let's just talk about random things. Yeah. Like, how fun is that to say, hey, we're going to talk about this thing, or let's talk about baseball. But I think the whole thing is to bring you into the family, to talk about what's happening on Sunday, what we talked about, what we preached on, and just invite you another aspect here at Camano Chapel. So
for sure.
Yeah.
Sweet.
So got a little Dr. Pepper going. What are you drinking?
Coffee. I mean, of course. Washingtonian, gotta have your coffee.
Do you put anything in it? Like, here's the deal. Like, this is what I've learned from a lot of people. Yeah. They say they love coffee, but what they love is foo-foo coffee. They love the latte with the white mocha and the caramel drizzle.
So I love that you use that word because growing up, I kid you not, my dad would say, no son of mine's drinking foo-foo in their coffee. So I did grow up drinking with a little bit of foo-foo. Okay. And then just like, college years, having to stay up really late and being, I was in this internship program where I was at a lot of different churches, and churches notoriously, not ours, thankfully, but churches notoriously have terrible coffee.
Oh, yeah. Because it's cheap. Yeah. Just get the blue can or the red can and just,
But we got some Fidalgo-based stuff that's really nice. But typically, I had to just like dump in the sugar and the cream in order to make it palatable. Okay. And then I don't know, something in me just like, I'm just going to wean myself off. And over the years, I've developed a taste for black coffee. So you become a
purist.
Yeah.
You're now a Sauvignon, whatever the word is for like
I'm not as crazy as some people. I do have maybe like 4 different ways of making coffee at home. Okay. But I know like, shout out Brian Dillon, has like maybe 7 ways of making coffee at home. And I love that. Like that's fantastic.
He's like the Renaissance man. He can teach you like how someone in Afghanistan knows how to make coffee. And it's like, that's delicious. Yeah. That's awesome. I like coffee. I love coffee, actually. I think I made a joke about not drinking coffee, but I like it, man. Let's just get it going. But I'm like simple. Either just like black or it's like a vanilla latte. So that's kind of where I'm at. I don't get into like the pour overs and the crazy stuff. I'm sure that's awesome, but
I mostly do French press at home right now.
I'll just do the maroon can right here. That's awesome.
Well, should we jump into Nehemiah?
Sure. So we're starting a new series.
Yeah.
in the summer here at Camano Chapel. By the way, if you're listening to this and somehow you're not from, or you live on Camano Island or Stanwood or somewhere close to us, we're out here on Camano Island, Northwest Washington, the Puget Sound. So if you're wondering, that guy doesn't sound like he's from here, I'm not. I'm from Texas, but I love this place. So at Camano Chapel, we started on Father's Day, which was a great day to start this. We celebrate our dads well. We love fathers. We talked about this story of this guy named Nehemiah, and we're going to be talking about Nehemiah for really the whole summer. And so we introduced it yesterday, and we kind of hit on this piece about Nehemiah was just a guy. I mean, he wasn't like a, I don't know, he wasn't like a priest, he wasn't like a pastor, he wasn't a king, prophet, anything like that. He was just a guy. And
so, question: if Nehemiah was alive today, how do you see him in our society? Like, what kind of role would he have?
Man, that's a great. It could be anything. I mean, he could be so if you look at, he's kind of the second. He's like the right hand guy, almost, so to speak, to the king, because he's a cupbearer. So a cupbearer was the guy that's like, here's your food. Let me drink this to make sure no one poisoned it, because if there is poison in it, I'll die and you'll stay alive. So he's like the guy that's protecting the big guy.
So the cupbearer isn't necessarily like a servant; they're more like a security.
Yeah, it's like head of security.
Yeah.
Like and also because you've developed this like really intimate relationship with the king. I mean, you're literally taking the bullet every time you eat. I mean, you're the guy making sure the food isn't poisoned, make sure the cup isn't poisoned. So when you trust your cupbearer, he's there at every meal. Wow, you think about breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and I don't know how often they ate, but really you think about anytime someone from the kitchen brings something to the king to eat.
Yeah,
there's people out for the king, man. Lop that guy's head off, and an easy way would be a little, something poisonous. So that cupbearer is taking. So we're going to talk about that in our sermon series. But so Nehemiah, he's like the right-hand man. He's the security guard, so to speak, but not just some security guard. Because you think about the security detail for like president. The president doesn't know those guys. They're in the service.
Yeah.
But this would be somehow like really close to the king. Like he's there almost all the time. So the king uses him to talk a lot. Like, what do you think about this? If he would even allow that conversation. So he's really close to the king, man.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So what about Nehemiah made you think that was like the best book to dive into right now?
So really, this is my first year here at Camano Chapel, and I love this place. And what I sensed kind of coming here, at least right off the bat, was a lot of people were really struggling post-COVID. They were really struggling. I mean, we just had this like pandemic and no one knows what the heck to do. And so for a lot of churches, they're still, I feel like, in sort of this like rebuilding mode. And it just so happened that the previous pastor retires. Here, this knucklehead comes up from Texas and is wanting to be a part of this awesome congregation. And so I'm kind of coming in, I guess, kind of like y'all's story and my story. There it is, y'all. That comes out. Y'all's story and my story coming together, and it's going, hey, I sense God doing rebuilding in my life. He's always rebuilding. And then he's rebuilding in Camano Chapel. So you see this awesome book about God rebuilding the wall through a man named Nehemiah and the Israelites, or the Jews. And it's just so pertinent, where we're at as a church, where this book is, and to see what's going on in this book and see where we're at as the life of the church and go, oh my gosh, there's so many implications from this book and where we're at. So I just thought, man, that's perfect for where we're at right now.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
So one of the things that, jumped out from the sermon yesterday from Nehemiah 1 is prayer, right?
Yeah.
Talks about prayer. So what, if you could just briefly go into like that section of the Nehemiah 1 of his relationship with prayer and, just explain that a little bit.
Yeah. So, I'm going to try to just briefly so that I don't redo the whole sermon. You're like, I heard this on Sunday, dude. Stop talking.
For sure.
He has his buddy show up. He's like, hey, how's Jerusalem? They're like, it's not good, man.
Yeah.
So he weeps, he mourns, he fasts, he prays. It says that in, I think,
Okay.
in verse 4. So there's this moment, it's kind of the gut punch. It's the, I'm reeling, I'm thinking, I'm mourning, I'm grieving what I just heard. Then it's the first step, I got to get with the Lord. So he fasts. So there's this essence of, I want to deny myself certain things in order to get my heart ready in prayer. Not that fasting makes my prayer more powerful, but it's more or less like how I'm preparing myself to come before the King of Kings. So we talked about kind of 5 things we saw in his prayer. Number 1, he acknowledges God is awesome. And along with that, he's like, I'm praying to you. Listen to me. Listen to my prayer. I'm praying morning and night.
Yeah.
So he's going, number 1, I acknowledge you're awesome and you're worth coming to morning and night. Please hear me. I am pouring out my heart about this issue. And then the second thing is he's like, I confess my sin. I confess the sin of my family, our nation. We've messed up. So there's this aspect of, Lord, we've messed up. I'm humbly coming to you. We need your help.
Yeah.
And then he gets into this third little piece that is remember your covenant. And in fact, I got my Bible out. See if I can get it real quick off the top. He says, I think he says it just like this. He says, we acted corruptly. Yeah, verse 8, remember the word which you commanded. So we talked about it's less about telling God to remember because he already knows.
Yeah.
But more about me knowing what God has already said and kind of bringing that to him, that God delights in that. And then my favorite piece of this is number 4. He's like, the people you rescued, we're your servants. And what we just talked about there was that in my prayer, I should have the humble disposition to say, God, not only am I asking a really big, hairy, audacious thing, but I'm willing to get my hands dirty to help with that thing. Because so often we want to complain, we want to gripe, but we want to do anything with it. We're like, please, someone else fix it. And we treat God like that sometimes. We say, well, hey, God, here's my prayer, but you go do it. And I think it's more about God, here's the situation at hand. So I'm here and I'm available and I want to be a servant. And then just this last thing was, he says, he basically was saying, I'm praying for success and praying like we're the people that delight in honoring you. And I think there's something powerful because we talked about that success is defined as when we honor God. So even if it doesn't look successful to the world standards, if we are delighting and honoring God and the thing that we're praying for honors God, that is successful. Even though the world may go, well, you didn't get more money, you didn't get bigger, you didn't whatever. In God's eyes, we honored God because we prayed for something that would honor God and we delight to honor God. So that's kind of 5 things that we kind of hit on in his prayer. It's part of Nehemiah chapter 1.
For sure. So kind of going into some of those a little deeper, like one of the last things you were saying is that like we honor God and God, that God doesn't necessarily return that in the way that the world would see that. Yeah. But that in the way that we honor God and he blesses us, right? And so I feel like one thing from my past that kind of speaks to that is when my grandpa growing up had a heart attack. We lived in Alabama at the time. I had a little bit of an accent back then, but not super big.
That's great.
But we moved up and
it's more like molasses in your mouth.
Yeah. I mean, I only lived there for 2 years, so
that's great.
But yeah. Anyways, so we moved back up to be with the family, and he after this heart attack, he was like in a wheelchair, couldn't talk, couldn't really do much on his own, and we were praying for healing. I grew up in a more charismatic background, and I still believe that God heals, and we were so close to seeing that prayer come to fruition. And then one day he accidentally just like lashed out on a nurse, and it just wasn't good after that. Because they saw him as a risk, and so they drugged him up, and it was a whole ordeal. But I took that upon myself to say that like God isn't healing him because I'm not doing the right thing. I'm not praying the right way. I'm not pure enough, or I have sin in my life, so God's not healing him. And it wasn't until years later that I realized that that's totally backwards. In that, like, even in the way that I thought God would answer the prayer, like he is in heaven now, and he is healed, and he is now in a much better existence than he was before. And so, I mean, that's something that I still even struggle with from time to time. But like, just knowing that God still answers prayers, even in ways that we don't realize.
I use this phrase a lot, living in the tension.
Yeah. And
just being real with the people listening and people that are going to go to our church, someone in the community that's just going to pick this up and go, that's kind of weird. It's from Camano Island. What's this podcast? And listen to a bunch of dudes talking. I use this phrase, living in the tension, because there are just some things that we live in the tension of not knowing why something is happening or why something isn't happening. I've been a part of revivals where someone literally physically gets healed. I've seen in my own family people that have prayed for something to take place and it never happened.
Yeah.
And I think what happens is we tend to start changing our theology and what we believe, either based on the thing that happened or didn't happen. So what happens is the person doesn't get healed, and so we start running to figure out in our theology why it didn't happen. The opposite happens. The person gets healed, and we start trying to like figure out the formula of like, okay, that thing, and that thing went, okay, that was part of it. Remember, we did this. So because these things happened, that person got healed. And we do that in our daily life, right? We're like, how is it that if you're in business and you see a formula kind of start to play out about how you're making sales, you're then the guy writing the script on, if you do this, and this, you're going to go 5 times your sales model. Yeah. And if you're not getting sales, you're like, well, we need to go back to the drawing board.
Yeah. And even like spiritually, even with like littler things with prayers, like I feel like we do that, not just healing, but just with asking God for things throughout our day or throughout a season.
Yeah. Well, one of the things we talked about in 1 John was this aspect of praying in the name of Christ, and according to his will, he'll do things. And so sometimes we take that as anything we think according to God's will. But then there is opposite. Sometimes we attribute things to God's will that aren't a part of God's will. For instance, I'm not the guy that will ever say, God gave this person cancer. I'm not that guy.
Yeah.
Now, why does that person have cancer? Because we live in a fallen, broken world. Because of disease and famine and the food we eat. I mean, we could have a whole podcast about the terrible food we eat and attribute it to stuff.
For sure.
So you have the person that you are begging God to heal.
Yeah.
And the problem is then we can kind of add into our theology a little bit of, okay, well, I'm not perfect, so I've got to strip everything. I mean, I've got to get to this bare bones because then God will hear me. And here's the thing. The precedent for God hearing someone is that they are righteous, and righteousness not on their own, but the imputed righteousness of Jesus, Romans chapter 3, 4, and 5. And so we have the ear of the Lord. But I'm the guy that still says I live in the tension because I'm going to go to the Lord. I'm going to submit fully to him. I'm going to look at what the word says according to what he does, and I'm going to lay that before the Lord. But there is still, at the end of the day, some kind of tension that I have to say that I do not run the universe. And I'm saying, Lord, I'm praying what you said.
Yeah.
I'm praying what you've already put in here, but it is at your feet. And I'm going to make myself available to help and to be a servant. I want to honor you. And I'm just laying it before you. And, you know, I've experienced great men of God that prayed and spoke truth.
Yeah.
And the person they were praying for still passed away. Now, again, here's what we do. We create theology around that. So we go, well, maybe this person didn't have enough faith in themselves. They didn't have enough faith in the Lord. Or they go, well, maybe my prayer wasn't big enough, or I didn't have enough faith when I was praying. So this is also a little bit of when we start getting prayer groups around, which I love the aspect of saying, let's get people in the prayer chain. Get that, love that.
Yeah.
But sometimes we have this idea that, like, if we can get enough people to bend the arm of God, he'll do what we say. And we don't say that, We don't say that.
But that's the theology brewing in the background.
But there is a little bit. It's
Yeah.
like, we get enough people, we're going to make God change his mind. And you're like, we've kind of missed it.
Yeah,
and
for
so,
sure.
So here's what I'm told to do. I'm told to pray for the sick. I'm told to pray for those who are hurting. I'm told to lift them up. And I'm also read that God is omnipotent. He's all powerful. Yeah. He's omniscient. He's all knowing, and he's omnipresent. So he's everywhere. So that powerful, all knowing, all present kind of God knows everything about the situation. And he still calls me to pray for that person. Even though I'm not I'm not making the outcome happen.
Yeah.
I'm still, so there's that tension. And so that's why I love that language of living in the tension,
Yeah. Well, and my brain is like, well, why do I, like, if God is all knowing, all powerful, why does he call me to still pray for that? But I mean, I think part of that is just because, well, one, he wants our involvement. He wants us to be a part of what he is doing, right?
I think a big thing of this also, and I would say this is for really us in the West, Americans.
Yeah.
I'm going to go out on a limb and say this. I think we've also turned prayer and the primary driver of prayer to be, it's supposed to produce outcomes. Like, the reason I pray, this is what we all think. I don't know if anyone would just say this.
Yeah.
But if someone were to say, why do we pray? I think most people probably somewhere in the back of their mind would actually say, if they could just be honest, well, prayer is to get stuff accomplished. Like, I pray to God when I need something changed, and that's the only reason I pray. And so you read, actually, you do some study on people that prayed in the past, even in this world, in this ancient world, the way Jews had daily prayer, even in liturgical churches, mainline churches, Anglicans, Presbyterian, there's different denominations that have daily prayer. In fact, one of the things I'm reading through is a 1662 Book of Common Prayer. Yeah. And there's what's called a daily office. And you are praying morning and evening, not a specific prayer of getting things done, but it's a self-judgment, self-reflection, proclaiming who God is, confession of sin. And there is such little room for getting God to move mountains. So I think if we were to actually get back to the heart of prayer, it is about, I want to use this word, it's a churchy word, the communion with God.
Yeah.
So for instance, I take my wife on dates, not so I can get her to do more things for me. You know what I'm saying? I'll go eat at, we have a restaurant called the Blue Heron, and it's really good. I like it. So
I
I'll
haven't
take.
actually tried it yet.
Yeah, dude, lunch is good, man.
Nice.
It's good. The fish is nice. So I'll take my wife. We're planning to go to the Blue Heron, but in my head, I would take her there so that I could talk with her and listen and talk and listen and talk. Not so I can go, okay, good. I got a check mark in the book. I'm going to get her to do this.
Yeah.
And so I think if we would go back to prayer, the biggest thrust of it, of why we pray, if we're not getting, quote unquote, the results we want, is that we've missed prayer in a major aspect. When you look through when Daniel prays, there's acknowledgement, there's confession, there's thanksgiving, and then 1/4 of his prayer is what they use this word supplication. I'm bringing to you because I need something done. But Daniel doesn't do all those first three in order to get God to do something like, okay, well, I'm going to fake acknowledgement. Okay, God, you're just so awesome. Oh, and I just confess my sin. Oh, I'm so thankful. Yeah. But here's what I really need.
Because that's how I've treated it. I've been told the Acts thing growing up, right?
Yeah. I got to get everything right. I got to get the steps and the formula. Okay.
But it's really just a checklist so that I can ask God for things.
Yeah.
That's how I treated
it. To the supplication.
Yeah.
And we've missed it. We've missed it if that is the main driver of our prayer. When even you look at Jesus' prayer, our Father, depending on what tradition you come, the Our Father prayer or the Lord's Prayer is Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. That your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. And then so you have this acknowledgement thing. You're really praying, God, you are up there bringing heaven to earth. It's your kingdom. Give us this day our daily bread. And so it's this acknowledgement. Thank you, Lord, that I have something to eat. And then it's, hey, forgive those who trespass me. Forgive me of my trespasses as I forgive those who trespass against me. Yeah. So there's a forgiveness aspect. And then it says, lead me not into temptation, deliver me from evil. So then there's a piece of there is a supplication there, but it's more towards how I live and less about what I can get from the Lord. Now, again, do we say we just pray that and we don't pray for things? No. But the heart of prayer is the presence with God, the communing with Him, talking with the King of Kings, the creator of everything. And so much we want microwave prayers. We want to, and again, let me also, I know I'm probably talking too much.
You're good.
I don't want the person listening to think that I'm calling their prayer for their dying father a microwave prayer. That's not what I'm saying. Yeah. Don't hear me say that. When you don't see things happening the way you want to see them happen, it shouldn't cause you to say, well, fine, God doesn't love me because He's not healing my grandfather or my dad. So you know what? I'm done. It should cause us to push in even more, because I believe that in the essence of that prayer, like Nehemiah said, morning and night, it's and God starts changing my heart. It might be that God changes the circumstances. He's changing our family. He's growing our faith in this thing. So I want to, hopefully you didn't hear me say that, but that's kind of part of that.
But it's really just saying that, like, we want the focus of our prayer not to be asking God for things. It can be a part of and should be a part of, because we do want to take things to the Lord, but we want the focus of our prayer to be really like connecting with the heart of God.
Yeah. I would agree with that, because as you're connecting with the heart of God, I believe that the Lord still speaks to us. It has to line up with His Word.
Yeah.
So the Holy Spirit's speaking to us, and then the Lord starts moving in our hearts to actually be praying for the right things.
Yeah.
And again, this is what's happened to me in the past. I get in my knucklehead mind, and I start wanting to get something done, and it's not working. So what happens is, even the good thing was not necessarily part of God's will.
Yeah.
So I start praying, going, "Okay, God, man, I'm missing something. What am I missing?" And I don't hear anything. So then so that night, Lord, I lay before you this thing, and it might mean that as I'm going to the Lord starts opening my mind and my eyes to what actually I've been missing the whole time, and it's like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize this part of it. So I just think the first emphasis is our communing, presence with God, being with Him, that should then drive in our hearts, because that's Psalm 37:4, like, commit yourself to the Lord, and as we delight in the Lord, He will give us the desires of our heart. And I just think it's this kind of cyclical thing where it's, as I delight in the Lord, He starts actually putting His desires in my heart, and so my prayers start changing, because it is less about, okay, I just come to you because you're the vending machine God, put in my quarters. So I put the right amount of quarters in. Yeah. It's not even quarters now. It's like dollar, credit card, and I'll get the thing because I put the right things in.
Yeah.
And it's like, man, we've missed prayer. We've missed
But it's even that, like, I think one distinction that you made there is it's not even like that God's, like, we're seeking God for the desires of our heart. It's that as we continually seek after Him, those desires may even change and shape into desires that God has for us, as opposed to our own selfish desires. Yeah,
I just think, and I believe so heartily, when we talk so little about prayer in church, we talk so little about prayer in our personal life, that prayer takes such a back seat to God's will in regards to what we think, not according to the Word. Yeah. Because in the Word, things are bathed in prayer, mainly to be connected with the heart of God and who He is. But a lot of times, so we just get out in front of ourselves. We forget to pray about things, and God changes our will and changes our heart in those things, and we actually start seeing God move us in different directions. And so there's a lot that we could talk about prayer that, man, we could probably fill this thing up, but that's one of those topics, man. Yeah. Nehemiah hits, it's the first chapter. It's the wall's broken. And the first thing we see before he does anything is he prays. I think there's something powerful for us to say that about us in our culture. Yeah. We see whatever it is hit the fan. We ought to be on our knees praying right then and there. When we have the disaster in our family, we be praying. And there's so much we could be talking about the rest of Nehemiah, but that's why we have a podcast. This will be week to week, and come here and talk about stuff that is part of it. Maybe it's off topic, but I'm hoping this was good for you. I hope you like listening to us.
No, I'm excited about going into Nehemiah a little more. I feel like that's a book of the Bible I really haven't dove in too deep into, so that'll be really cool.
Awesome. Yeah. Man. Well, hey, if you want to hear more stuff that you like, I mean, I'm not sure what I'm thinking of, like feedback. Let us know, like in the comment section. Tell us what you'd like us to talk about, or
we're developing this as we go. Yeah. We want to make sure it's something that you want to hear. So if you have an idea, stuff that you'd like to hear more of, just let us know. There's going to be an email in the description of the video, or if you're listening to it audibly, a description on the podcast.
Yeah, forward this, share it with your friends. If there's something like, hey, there's a couple of dudes talking about stuff, send it to them, and maybe that's a good resource for you in the road. But,
and be sure to like the video and subscribe on Facebook, or not Facebook, on YouTube or on whichever podcast platform
wherever this thing is at. Like
it,
subscribe it, ding it, don't. I mean, all the things.
It really does help a lot for other people being able to find it, because we just want people to hear the good news.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Man, we love it. Thanks for being with us today, and see you next week, man.
Yeah.